What's dudes? We're back finally with the CIL semifinal match against Chase. Last time we played Chase, things went really well, and I'd love to repeat that because Chase always talks about his little strawberry shortcakes. So I decided to spend some of my hard-earned money on some today, and you know what? They're bad. They're like pure sugar, and they're not very like. It doesn't taste like strawberry at all. It's it's disappointing. Chase, that was the worst recommendation of all time. So, because of my anger for this terrible recommendation and all the hype surrounding it, I've decided I have to destroy Chase. Unfortunately, this time around, it's not going to be quite as easy because he's made some roster changes, as you'll see on the screen, that are really specific, I'll say. I'm not going to say that he did it specifically to counter team the Kinglers, but there's a lot of stuff on there that, oh, not a lot, but there's just some changes that help against some things like baton pass or a couple new dark types to help deal with the Chandelure, who's pretty good against him. And we're also seeing Araquanid is his water type now. He no longer has Keldeo, which for me is a blessing because Keldeo, although it's often accused of being one-dimensional, is a huge threat to my team. We struggle with water types. You'll see I prepped accordingly this time. He also has a Tornadus to taunt and Tailwind as potential measures, along with Donphan's Roar to phase out Baton Pass. So, he also has Steelium Z. We have Flyinium Z this week. So how are we going to beat these adjustments? I anticipate he's going to bring a lot to beat Baton Pass because that's what beat him last time, and he had no answer for it. So I'm thinking Roar Donphan and probably Taunt Tornadus, at least one of the two, right? Because those are his only ways of stopping it. Big Mama here happens to be good against both of those. She's rocking the Earthquake, Thunderfang, Slykoff, and Stealth Rock because we need the rocks. The Thunderfang is it gets damage on Aerodactyl, Celesteela, Araquanid should we have to stay in, and Tornadus. So it's good against those things. It's walled by Superior. I'm not too worried about Superior. You'll see why in just a bit. This Frosty spread is perhaps one of the more interesting things that I've come up with this season. Maybe not quite as heat as HP Fire Scizor, but pun not intended there. We have Kyurem Black with the Habanberry, which weakens dragon moves. So we have Fusion Bolt, Ice Beam, Roost, Iron Head, and an interesting spread here. You'll notice we're rocking was that Gentle Nature? Lax Nature. We're rocking the Lax Nature with a lot of FizzDef. And this set is one that I stole from my buddy Marv, who had Kyurem last season. I really wanted it. He used it against me, and the physically defensive set kind of caught me off guard. I needed to 6-0 him for a chance to get into playoffs, and I made some unnecessarily risky plays. And we were able to notch the W, but one thing that stuck with me was the impression of how physically bulky Kyurem is. You can see it's got, it's not going to let me. There we go. It's got a lot of defense right there. 125 HP and 100 defense is a lot. So it serves as a countermeasure against Araquanid unless it's special, but we resist it, so we should be fine, and I don't anticipate him running a special variant. The physical bulk, I can't remember all the things that this spread does, but it does a lot of things. The 44 special attack EVs, KO max defense Donphan from full, or they have a 50% chance. 56.3% chance, that's it. The 4 attack EVs are necessary to 2-hit KO max defense bold Florges with Iron Head, so if I predict it, he can't come in. Also, if it's something I might Iron Head, like let's say Mega Aerodactyl, for instance, he might think, I can live a Fusion Bolt and an Iron Head, which I think he can. Barely, but I think he can. Also, because of this HP stat, we live a Moonblast from Florges, I think up to like 88%. As long as we have 88% of our health, we're good. The Habanberry helps me also take on the Gudra, meaning I can, if he decides to stay in and keep dropping Dracos for some reason, I can actually keep roosting him off until I think the third one where he actually can't even 2-hit KO me, because the Habanberry, if I roost, the next Draco does the exact same. I roost again, the next one does half that. So from there, I can just proceed to beat it down with Ice Beams. He has a really hard time switching into Kyurem, so it made a lot of sense to bring it. Originally, this was a Toxic Spike Scolipede, but I didn't see him bringing Florges because it was fodder for a lot of my team. And the only other things that I thought would really be frustrating to wear down would be Goodra and Donphan, and Frosty handles both of those. The bulk lets him live a max attack Adamant Stone Edge from Mega Aerodactyl. It lives a Stone Edge from Donphan. So in that 56% chance to KO from full, we do have the Terrible, remember, so sturdy doesn't matter. Even if he hits the Stone Edge, even if he crits the Stone Edge, it doesn't KO us. So this Frosty can do a lot of different roles, so I thought this was a great spread to bring. We have a physically defensive Manaphy because this is our actual switch in to both Araquanid and Weavile. I do have a Mega Scizor, which is a phenomenal answer against Weavile, and I was so close to bringing it, but ultimately I felt that Manaphy had a bit more utility for me. Rocking the Scald, Ancient Power, Ice Beam, and Light Screen. Last move really didn't matter, so I just threw that on there. In case I wanted to take on Goodra a little better, or maybe Florges, or who knows. The Ancient Power is for Araquanid, and the Rocky Helmet is so that when he clicks Liquidation or Leech Life, he keeps taking a lot of damage and very physically bulky. It also helps deal with Mega Aerodactyl in a pinch. It can deal with Victini and Donphan. So the physically defensive spread counteracts a lot of stuff for me. It can also, a physical Tornadus doesn't do well against the set either. So a lot of utility between these two, and pretty solid defensive synergy for his team. We're packing Beef Jones, who is really shining towards the end of this season here. This idea came to me from my good friend Black117. If you guys aren't following him on Twitter, you better. He actually posts YouTube content as well, and he's one of the best League players I've ever seen. He sent me the idea of the Cursed Snorlax. I tweaked the spread a little bit because I didn't want too much HP because of Celesteel's Leech Seed. So, but it is very physically bulky, but enough Spadef that I don't think a single special attacker, I don't think even Specs, maybe Specs, no, well, obviously Specs Goodra can't with Draco because it would drop his special attack, but it's super duper duper bulky, which means it gets a lot of setup opportunities. And once Snorlax sets up, he does not have a good way of KOing it because he doesn't have a fighting type. His best attack to hit it would be a Banded Superpower from Tyranitar, and I believe at +1 he cannot 2-hit KO me, which means subsequent superpowers cannot 2-hit KO me. Meanwhile, again, low HP, so Leech Seed doesn't take that much from us. However, our switch into Celesteela is this Tornadus. We have a really awesome set here because we do have the Flyinium Z. I really wanted to bring Tornadus, but this was also an idea of my friend Black. He said that he just liked this set. Originally he had a bulk up agility, and he himself said, you know, maybe that was a little overzealous, and I kind of agreed because in testing it was impossible to get both. Ultimately, I decided I might get the chance to agility and force Weavile to Ice Shard. With this spread, Ice Shard cannot. I don't think it can 2-hit KO after rocks. And we have the superpower to hit it as well as Tyranitar. We need superpower to KO Tyranitar because, believe it or not, Hammer Arm isn't guaranteed, I don't think. Or maybe it is, but it has a 90% chance to hit, so that's not good enough for me because we've seen how lucky I get with these things. Physical to just maximize the fly damage, and Thunder Punch because I expect a specially defensive Celesteela. It's his best countermeasure to the Sand mode, and he doesn't need very much physical bulk to do it, so he can capitalize on his Celesteela set by being especially bulky, so physical to me makes a lot more sense in this case. Also, did I bring Sand? I did bring Sandstream. Also, if Sand's up, then that means he can hit Mega Aerodactyl harder with Thunder Punch. And finally, we have Sia, who has done absolutely nothing for us this season. She's been to 2 other games before, mostly for moral support, but she has a very specific goal this week. She's our spin blocker. She's going to take on Donphan. Once we get our rocks up, we need him to stay up because they pressure a lot of his team. Victini, Weavile, Aerodactyl, Tornadus, Araquanid, and is nice for just chipping Goodra and Florges, which are his bulkiest mons, as well as just chipping Celesteela a little bit. So rocks are really, 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 really important. So Sia here has a lot of physical bulk to help deal with the Donphan. Flamethrower, Shadow Ball, Energy Ball, and Memento. Memento because the T-Tar, I don't know if he realizes how good Tyranitar and Victini pair together in this match. So if he brings T-Tar, it's a perfect switch in to Chandelure, which is my Victini response. So if he brings if he focuses on building around Victini, he brings T-Tar. Chandelure is basically useless at that point because its two things are beating Victini and beating Donphan. That's the only reason I have it. And spin blocking, but that falls under the beating Donphan. The memento is so that when that Tyranitar shows up, I can click that and I can actually set up with good old Beef here. I could go into other stuff if I didn't want to set up that early, like, I don't know, maybe Celesteela was too healthy and I didn't feel confident. But really, Beef only needs to get to +1 and it handles pretty much the whole team. So Memento being able to facilitate the support, I felt would be a really good decision. And with that said, that's the team. It's a little bit weak to Serperior, but again, Frosty can sort of handle that because he's got the Habanberry, so Leaf Storm plus Dragon Pulse will not KO, even if it's modest specs, which he can't do because you can't switch moves. And Sia takes it on reasonably well, so she can do a few things in this match. Jumping right into it, I'm surprised by a couple of things. Oh, how are we on the wrong side here? We'll switch that when it starts. I'm surprised at a couple of things. Florges, first of all, because I told you guys it's setup fodder. I really didn't think it would come. Victini was somewhat surprising. It's really good against a lot of stuff, and it puts some offensive pressure out there. But I have a lot of things to beat it, like Manaphy, potentially Scarf Kyurem, Excadrill, Hippowdon. Thundurus poses a threat to it. Scolipede can pose a threat to it because it does get Earthquake and Rock Slide and stuff like that. Chandelure, Snorlax can actually set up on Victini as well. It just didn't seem like it made sense to come. So I had too many responses for it, but there it is sitting there. Weavile instead of Tyranitar, which I'm happy to see because, well, I'm not happy to see because I'm weak to both of them, but I felt that Weavile was more manageable than Tyranitar. Goodra, Araquanid, I knew those were coming, and Aerodactyl surprised me as well. So right away I'm thinking, well, I could get up rocks pretty easily, but so could he, and his only potential rocker is Aerodactyl. I'm wondering if he's going to use sort of like a suicide lead Aerodactyl, and I don't have like a Scarf to catch him off guard and get an early KO, so I don't really have a way to do that. I ultimately decide that Manaphy is going to be the best play overall, mostly because the hardest thing to switch into is Weavile, and I feel like if Manaphy and Weavile stand face to face, his best play is to switch out, so I assume that's what he will do. Let's get it started. Switch sides because we are the Kinglers. He does lead with the Aerodactyl as expected. We lead with our Poseidon, putting that Scald pressure out there right off the bat. I sort of think he might go Araquanid or Goodra, but I decide to Scald anyway because I just want to get some damage off on this if he decides to get risky, stay in. Maybe fish for like a Thunderfang, Flinch, or Para or something like that. Do a lot of damage right off the bat. We are physically defensive, so the Stone Edge miss sort of mattered. I'll explain later how that could have helped if he hit us. But we go for the Scald again. I almost went for Ancient Power, but I thought Goodra might come in. But he goes into Araquanid, and I decide that I can put on a lot more immediate pressure with Kyurem out there. He goes for the Spiderweb, which I thought was a really surprising move, but he also has no ground types, so I have no reason right now not to click Fusion Bolt. He also doesn't have very much physically defensive pressure, but he does have the Florges. Now I go for the Fusion Bolt. You're going to see it does a good chunk of damage, 31%. He's going to get that leftovers recovery here in just a sec. And at this point, I can 2-hit KO it, and I kind of wish I would have in hindsight, but I decided, you know what? Every time I see Araquanid, I can go hard, Kyurem, and put a ton of pressure on his team. That's going to pay off in the long run. He goes for the Wish. I'm not sure what he's going to heal up. I didn't think he would stay in because this is a Chandelure. I could Calm Mind up along him. He decides to stay in. We do get a crit with the Shadow Ball, which doesn't matter because he's getting the Wish plus leftovers this turn. A Spinash drop would have been nice. If I'm going to get hacks. He goes for the Moonblast. It doesn't do a lot, but it does enough that I'm starting to get somewhat concerned. And he goes for the Calm Mind. And I thought, oh my gosh. Like this, again, Florges didn't make sense at all to me. But this set was successful for Chase in the past when I was trying to win every single game with Calm Mind Clefairy. And it did get enough special attack drops to beat me down. So that was unfortunate, and he's decided to test his luck with this again. I decide I can't mess around with this threat because I'm not going to be able to do any more damage. I can't bank on a crit, so I'm going to Memento here. Sucks for me because I'm losing my best Victini switch in. Granted, because Kyurem and Manaphy are physically defensive and Hippowdon, they can help, but if it's special, I'm in trouble. So I go Frosty here, and remember, I told you I can always live that Moon Blast from full. I do get the crit on Florges, which it was a 2-hit KO, so he would have gotten some nice damage off, but I can also roost up on just about everything, and in this case, with Victini, I would have roosted. Because of my bulk, there's not a whole lot this Victini can do to me except Dazzling Gleam, and I didn't think he'd bring it. He goes for the V-Create. He is slower than our non-invested Kyurem, so I'm not 100% sure what the plan is there. In hindsight, I kind of wish I would have gone for Roost instead of the second Fusion Bolt. But I thought that I could get momentum and potentially set up on this Victini with good old Beef here. So that's what I try to do. Unfortunately, and this is really important because if I do successfully set up here, it's actually over at this point. Because I told you about all the calcs with all the other things. I don't know about the Gudra though, but I am very specially bulky as you saw. So nothing on his team except for low kick from Weavile could take me out at this point. He just can't, it's not possible. He has to crit like multiple Stone Edges, but I'm not able to get that +1, which is really frustrating for me. I decided to go into Poseidon because I wasn't expecting Fake Out. I was expecting like a knockoff, and I figured, okay, well, I'll get some nice chip on him, pressure him with Scald or something. He goes for the knockoff there, knocks off the Rocky Helmet, which is unfortunate for me because now my Araquanid answers are depleting quickly. He decides to switch out on the Ancient Power into Araquanid, which I found somewhat surprising. But as you can see, his Araquanid is very bulky, takes it very well. This tells me it's probably max HP. It's got the leftovers instead of the choice bands. So I'm not sure how it's gonna affect it. But he goes for the substitute here. Thankfully, we got those boosts because as you saw, I was only doing 18%. This is actually going to work in our favor. Such a haxy match. This is going to work in our favor because now we can break the sub every time because we got the +1. He's going to Leech Life, get a little bit back. We're going to be able to whittle him down because we're going to do a solid 25% every time we hit him with the Ancient Power. Unfortunately, he's getting, I think, like half of that back. I think he's getting about half of it back every turn. And at this point, I've noticed it's a losing battle because I'm losing health faster than he's getting it. Or I'm losing health faster than I'm taking it from him. So at this point, I sort of resign myself to sacking Manaphy, and because I have to sack Manaphy here, my Weavile responses are getting very low. As long as Hippowdon is full, I can take an Ice Skull Crash because I'm so physically bulky. I also do have the Snorlax, who takes it on reasonably well, but doesn't want to switch into it. So Weavile now becomes a setup opportunity for Snorlax in the late game. But and what I found important at this point, because I knew Poseidon was going to go down, if I can just keep Araquanid as low as possible, then it might provide setup opportunities for some of my other Pokemon. My thought was I would go into Tornadus and Agility up, because this sounds crazy, I wasn't 100% sure he would have Ice Shard on Weavile, because I was thinking he would want Poison Jab and Low Kick, because if he lacked either one of them, Clefable sets up on him and beats his team without Celesteal. Just looking at his team composition here. If he doesn't have Low Kick, Snorlax sets up on him and beats his entire team. So I thought he had to have one of the two. I wasn't sure if he would give up priority or like a really powerful ice move to hit, because the Weavile's faster than Tornadus and Thundurus. So it's not a crazy thing to give up the Ice Shard in this scenario. I wasn't 100% sure what I was dealing with here. I decided not to Agility because I could not take Liquidation plus Ice Shard. So I just go for the KO. That thing's out of the way, which is really nice. I think my whole team outspeeds it until Snorlax starts cursing up, but it kills basically everything left. Weavile's going to go for the Fake Out. We don't live in Ice Skull Crash ever. So that's why I wanted to agility. But I decided at this point, Thundurus needs to go down. We didn't get to use our Z move. Would have been cool. Whatever. Thundurus goes down. But again, I need Big Mama, because Big Mama, again, I said takes an Icicle Crash from full, provided, she doesn't flinch. She can actually handle it pretty well. He goes into Aerodactyl and predicting the Earthquake. I almost went for Thunderfang there. The reason I didn't was because it was a roll. The roll was in my favor to kill from that range, but I don't like playing maybes. And I thought he might, there was a chance he could sack at that point. Let's see. So his play here, of course, is to go Weavile and just take me out. But what I don't think he was anticipating is, because this isn't the standard Hippowdon spread, we are really, really bulky. There's the flinch. We are really, really bulky, so we can actually just take this thing out with an Earthquake, provided he doesn't flinch us with Icicle Crash, and then we're in a really good position. See, so we live on 4%, and of course we flinch. So all is not lost. Again, the whole plan here is to get the opportunity to set up with Snorlax. It can set up on either one of these Pokemon, so just take out as many things so that Snorlax has the best chance possible. Him actually killing Hippowdon sort of helps now, knowing his Goodra set, which is interesting. It's not crazy, but it's interesting. You don't typically see what you're about to see. He goes for the knockoff, 32%. That's the most damage this Weavile's ever going to be able to do to me now, because he knocked off my leftovers. And now I'm cursing up. I have the Thick Fat, so his ice moves aren't going to do anything. And what is his... Fake Out was his other one. So he had Fake Out, Ice Shard, Knockoff, and Icicle Crash. If he had something other than Fake Out, like if he had Low Kick, I think I could have lived 2 once I got to +1, but then I'm starting to play with sleep turns and crits and stuff like that. So luckily he didn't have the Low Kick. At that point his whole moveset was revealed. And he does have a physical Goodra, which, to be honest, either way it didn't matter at this point. The Outrage is actually going to hit harder at +1 than a special at +1 defense than a special Goodra would, just because of the spread that I'm using. So it in some ways it pays off for him as well, but at this point it's pretty much over. Here's the thing though. If Weavile crits me with knockoff, he can actually still win. So the next sequence of plays is because of the fact that I don't want to risk losing to a crit, and the odds of him hitting himself in confusion because of Outrage are much better than, or are not much better, but they're good. So I think it's like 25 or 50% or something like that. So all I need to do is he needs to hit himself in confusion 1 time in any number of these outrages, and then Beef Jones will be able to be at a healthy enough amount that Weavile cannot come in, crit it, and beat it. His only play then would be to go for Icicle Crash flinches. So again, you're going to see where rest. This isn't the most exciting. I'll speed this up a little bit. Fast mode. So there he goes for the Outrage again. He's doing a consistent 25. Thankfully, he doesn't get any crits during this process. He still hasn't hit himself in confusion, unfortunately. There's that. So you see I have to go for the rest again. Not the most exciting, but this is the safest way to ensure the win. And there he hits himself in confusion, and at that moment, that's when I knew, okay, this game is pretty much over, because the Weavile doesn't have Low Kick. He's either locked into Outrage, or he doesn't have anything else to hit me with, or I don't know his set. Snorlax is able to pick up the KO with Return. We're at a nice and healthy 47%, so even a crit knockoff does like maybe just over half at that point. Oh, I forgot about the Fake Out. So it definitely does like half at this point. But he goes for the Icicle Crash flinch, which is his only play. It was a smart play. But we don't flinch, and Beef Jones is able to carry us through the semifinals and into the finals, and we are going to be taking on our adversary, our rival from the very beginning, Cantocast Blue. The only blemish on the Kingler record this season. We're going to have to do our best to avenge it, as well as our good friend Chase, who put up the best battle I've ever seen him do. I feel like he made every play right. The only thing that I think held him back was that his sets were kind of suboptimal, especially given the team composition, which I also think could have been better. But then again, I was prepared for what I felt were different and what I felt were more optimal team compositions against my team. But as you can see, his team put in a lot of work, and he was really close to winning that. It was a hacksy match. There was a lot of back and forth. I think all in all, it kind of balanced out because that flinch on Snorlax in the very beginning was kind of the only reason he was still in it. The ancient power boosts were the reason I was able to keep Araquanid so low, but again, I could have set up on that with other stuff or KO'd it with Thundurus. It would have sped things up if I hadn't got the ancient power boost, actually. Really interesting set, though, the sub Spiderweb liquidation leech life set with a lot of bulk in there and leftovers. I like that. Chase did an awesome job. So make sure if you follow him on Twitter, or if you don't, go follow him. Go send him a congratulations, because, again, that was an amazing battle he put up. I was not prepared for the things that he brought, but luckily we were able to come through, snag that W, and get a chance at CIL Gold. We've got our work cut out for us. Blue will be putting up his best, I'm sure, but we have destiny on our side. And it is time for Poseidon, Frosty, Beef Jones, Big Mama, and the rest of the Kingler gang to get ready for the finals. So thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good one. Bye.